Right, hey guys, how we doing? I've just noticed my face is bright red. I just been for a 10K run for the first time in like 3 months and just got in the shower, so I'm just like, whoa. But today, just thought I'd explain that one. Today we are checking out video from Mother's Basement, and it's going on about the Uzumaki anime, Downward Spiral of the Year. So I watched a lot of videos, and a lot of people were talking about how excited they were for the Uzumaki anime to come out. I've not read the manga. I know it's a horror, and I've not watched the anime. I just know that like when the first episode came out, everyone was like, "My God, the animation's incredible! Yes, it's here." And then as soon as the second episode came, and then it was just so like, what happened? Like I was gonna check this out, and then it was just like no. So what happened? Let's find out from GF.
Horror mangaka Junji Ito is famous the world over for all the uniquely creepy curses and hideous monstrosities that have popped out of his shockingly happy and well-adjusted cat dad brain over the years. But perhaps the most insidious curse associated with his work is the one that looms over every attempted adaptation, turning each one into its own kind of hideous monstrosity, specifically the kind that's not scary at all and sucks. Unless
Well, that's not what you want at all, is it? Jesus.
you're in the mood for schlocky B-movie bullshit, then some of the live-action ones can be pretty fun.
Oh, there's live action. Ooh.
But when it comes to anime, the master of horror manga's grotesquely detailed work has a reputation for being fundamentally unadaptable, with both recent attempts at anthologizing his short horror stories being boring, janky, and aggressively bland, while Ufotable's 2011 Gyo OVA is so bad it's kind of hilarious. In 2019,
What the hell was going on there? Jesus.
backed by Adult Swim and Production IG, Mushishi and Flowers of Evil director Hiroshi Nagahama set out to finally lift that curse with a wildly ambitious adaptation of Ito's magnum opus, Uzumaki.
Yeah.
The story of a small town on the Japanese coast whose people are slowly infected and consumed by the simple yet irresistible allure of the spiral. Eyes tracing its looping curves incessantly, obsessively, as the shape twists its way through their minds and eventually bodies.
Hey, oh my God, what?
Our
Oh.
heroine, Kyrie, caught between an attachment to her family and the place she grew up, and the increasingly convincing and desperate pleas of her slightly crazy boyfriend Shuichi to get the hell out of Kurozucho while they still can. It's a premise that seems kind of silly when you just say it out loud, but is made
I
utterly
was going to say, these visuals are really helping me understand the creepiness of this.
terrifying by Ito's mastery of his medium and incredible skills as an illustrator, which arguably makes it the hardest of his works to do justice in animated form.
That is so... Oh, and then it spirals into... Oh.
But Nagahama had a plan. To avoid the atmosphere-obliterating color design issues that plague other Ito adaptations, his anime would be rendered entirely
Black
in
and white.
black and
Yeah,
white.
I've seen clips.
What's more, an innovative 3D motion capture rotoscoping technique would be employed to create subtly detailed performances that could convincingly react to the horrors on screen.
Right.
And most importantly, the studio's talented animators would be given the time necessary to animate 4 episodes worth of those horrors fully convincingly without sacrificing all the fine details that make Ito's art so chilling.
Yeah, like, weren't they given... I'm sure... I watched so many videos. I'm sure there was a... Weren't they given 5 years? 5 years to work on this? Like, or at least it's been in production for something about 5 years.
As it turned out, that was going to take quite a bit more time than anyone anticipated. A combination of pandemic-related delays and issues with the show's boundary-pushing animation pipeline resulted in its release date being pushed back from Halloween 2020 to 2022. Then 2023, and finally this year, leading many fans to worry that this production, too, would be a victim of the curse.
And it seems like it, right? So it was meant to come out in 2020. Oh my god, okay.
But when, at long last, that first episode aired, those fears quickly dissipated.
That looks so weird.
By exactly the fears we were hoping we'd feel all along. The animation is smooth, natural, and impressively expressive, using a frankly ridiculous number of moving lines to almost perfectly capture what made the original manga's art so viscerally unnerving.
Whoa.
And the accompanying sound design feels oppressively eerie, enhanced by a masterfully composed soundtrack by Colin Stetson that sends haunting sax notes spiraling around the viewer's ears like the curse is reaching out of your screen for you. When the horror hits, it hits hard, harder than anyone could have reasonably hoped. It's not quite a perfect episode. Cramming roughly 3 chapters worth of content into 22 minutes leaves it pretty light on time to build tension into its big set pieces, but by weaving together the stories of chapter 1 and 3 as A and B plots, using the death of Shuichi's dad as an inciting incident 11 minutes in, and the spiral scar horrifically consuming Azami as the big climactic episode ending scare, it does give both scenes just enough time to settle on the viewer and start eating at their nerves. And by sprinkling in elements of Shuichi's mom deteriorating from chapter 2 and revealing the first stages of the slow, sweaty kid's spiral infection from chapter 8, it's able to plant hooks for ongoing storylines while leaving those scares the space they need to work. I still think an extra couple minutes of slow, quiet atmosphere building would have gone a long way, and Shuichi being super spooked by spirals from the jump kind of flattens his arc, but as it stands, it's still a solid 9 out of 10, scarier than damn near any other anime out there, and it lays the groundwork for an equally frightening follow-up.
Damn, so like, I think I should at least check the first episode out, like, because everyone said it's good, and then it just, whoa.
And as you can imagine, the anime community was beyond excited to see what that next episode had in store. Until they actually saw it.
Right. But how and why? How, why, how? Oh my god. Where's the detail? Where's the...
Overnight, the series transformed from the internet's new darling to an absolute laughingstock. Viewers racing to find the most hilarious animation cuts and embarrassing errors for viral post fodder as soon as each new episode dropped. Many began comparing the show to season 2 of Blue Lock.
Yeah, I saw a clip of this. Apparently, like, it's not even animated. It's just like JPEGs that are just like moving across the screen. Like, why do that? Blue Lock season 1 was so popular.
And, I mean, I don't think that's fair. At least Uzumaki has in-between frames most of the time, and even when it is sliding PNGs across the screen, at least it doesn't use fucking CapCut transitions.
Oh my
the
god.
animation is bad, but for the most part, it's still better than your average scoop of seasonal isekai slop.
That's not good.
Mainly, it's the gap in quality between its best animation and its worst shit that makes those moments feel so laughably awful, which is only exacerbated by the fact that even Uzumaki's worst episodes do still feature some really impressive money shots.
Alright, so there are moments, but still, man, to have such an impressive first opening episode and then just like,
Perhaps that's why initially some fans still clung to the faint cope that maybe it was just episode 2 that got all fucked up like that and the rest of it was gonna be okay. But any optimism they had left was dashed within days when Adult Swim producer Jason DeMarco took to Blue Sky to say, "We knew this would happen. We were screwed over, and the options were A, air nothing and call it a loss.
Oh, no.
B, air episode 1 and leave it incomplete. Or C, run all 4, warts and all. Out of respect for the hard work, we chose C.
Damn. I mean, because it sucks as well, because like obviously 2020 happened and they were trying to work through that. That's a struggle. Man, it ruined so many things.
After waiting so long, it makes sense that people would be mad. Unfortunately, I can't tell them who to blame, but someone is definitely at fault here, and we all just had to do our best when things imploded. The statement was deleted almost as soon as it was skeeted, but no takesies backsies is the law of the internet, and disgruntled fans, desperate to figure out what the HFIL happened, immediately began speculating as to who that someone might be. Did the Japanese studio leave Adult Swim in the lurch? Was it someone higher up on the Warner Bros. Discovery food chain? Or was DeMarco simply covering his own ass by shifting blame to some nebulous third party that would never be named? That last one doesn't really seem like DeMarco's MO to me. He's always struck me as an artist's producer, someone who does everything he can to support cool people making cool shit, even if it doesn't always work out.
I have no clue who he is, but I'll take your word for it.
And when things didn't work out in the past, like with the Rick and Morty anime, the Fooly Cooley sequels, Fena Pirate Princess, he's always spun things to the fans in as positive a way as possible to preserve whatever viewer hype he can.
Okay, so fair.
I'm inclined to believe that he and Nagahama really were screwed over, but that leads the question of who did the screwing. We can glean some clues by simply looking at the show's credits, which show a stark contrast between episodes. Episode 1 had 4 animation directors, 2 leads and 2 assistants, with Nagahama himself being one of those leads.
Oh, this is an interesting way of looking at it. Okay, cool, because every episode has... Yeah, cool.
Implying that he directly or indirectly oversaw at least half of the cuts in the episode, while also directing the entire episode's production and storyboarding the whole series. That's a crazy amount of work for one guy to do, and even if the storyboarding was finished in pre-COVID pre-production, it would have turned Nagahama into a serious bottleneck for the production, but it also allowed him to impose a singular vision on the whole thing, and the results speak for themselves. Episode 2, on the other hand, had 24 animation directors. None of
what? Alright, this makes sense.
Or Nagahama spread across 9 different studios, most of them at Chinese outsourcing studio Phoenix Animation Holdings, who took the lead on the episode before outsourcing a lot of their outsourced work to all those other ones. That's approximately 1 different director for every minute of animation.
Oh my god, that's crazy.
And like almost 2 studios for every chapter it adapts, which explains why the quality is so wildly inconsistent.
Like all over the place, right? Okay, yeah, Jesus.
Had only 19 animation directors and 4 studios involved, which explains why it's a bit more consistent, but still by no means great, while episode 4 had a scant 10 animation directors, the bulk of whom were working at the same studio that did episode 1, Fugaku, with some support from Khan Studio and Studio Mosquet, though there were also 4 different episode directors in the mix on that one, so production was clearly still a bit of a mess, just less of one this time. And again, the results speak to that. It's clear that someone wasn't happy with Nagahama's approach to the first episode and all the time that it took to finish, and so handed off production duties to a different studio.
Everybody else.
Animators and directors would pick up the phone at the time just to get the damn thing done already, with Nagahama left to work on just a few minutes of the finale. Now, as for who that someone was, Well, anime productions do work on notoriously tight schedules, and studios are booked years in advance, so one possibility is that producers at Production IG ran into scheduling conflicts due to all the delays, and had to make a tough call between this one bloated American-backed vanity project and all the Japanese business relationships that might be impacted by taking resources from Kaiju number 8 or Kimi ni Todoke or Attack on Titan or any of the other irons that they've had in the fire during the 5 years they've been making this thing. That said, given how many Adult Swim originals they've overseen and animated, not to mention other American-backed projects they've worked on recently, it's pretty clear that Production IG does actually care, or at least cared about their relationship with Cartoon Network and their general reputation in Hollywood. So, I don't know how likely that explanation really is. On the other hand, speaking of Hollywood, there is another guy in the picture we haven't really talked about yet, who we know for a fact doesn't care about his relationship with animation studios or animation in general.
Release his face, reveal it, show us who he is, cast him to the fiery pit.
David Zaslav.
That guy! Whoa! Who is he?
The CEO of Warner Bros. Discovery.
Ah, okay. Yes, of course. Warner Media, Discovery, complete merger. Become Warner Brothers Discovery. Okay.
Which merged in April 2022, 2 months before Uzumaki's first big non-COVID related production delay, and 4 months before Zaslav started directing his C-suite to delete original animated series from HBO Max as tax write-offs. Also a couple years before he completely gutted Cartoon Network and fired basically every animator working for them this last summer.
He sounds like a bad man. It was him all along.
How do you suppose that guy, or one of his hatchet man underlings, might have reacted to the realization that they've been pouring an unquantifiable amount of money into perfecting a 4-episode animated prestige TV horror miniseries that's slated to come out whenever it's done? Do you think that guy would honor the promises made to the artists involved by his predecessors, who clearly believed in the project enough to give them carte blanche in the first place?
Nope, not at all. Doesn't sound like that kind of guy.
Or do you think he'd immediately boot the most obvious bottleneck off the project and demand his remaining peons get the goddamn thing on television already before the accountants decide what to do with it? Could that perhaps be why option A was air nothing and call it a loss? We'll never know for sure, since most of this is no doubt under ironclad NDA, but if we adhere to Occam's razor, Warner Bros. Discovery cutting funding because they don't give a shit is the explanation that makes the least assumptions. And if we look at all the other Adult Swim original anime that have come out undercooked since the merger, compared to the relatively mild disappointments like Fena Pirate Princess that came before it, the only common denominators are on the American side of those productions. So that's the explanation I'm going to choose to believe.
I'm with you on it, Jeff. He seems like the culprit.
Entirely based on logic, definitely not because it fuels my personal grudge against the stupid asshole who stole Coyote vs. Acme from the world. But I don't know if I believe that Uzumaki would have been the show we were all hoping for if he hadn't screwed it over.
Oh, okay.
Because the production values aren't the only or even biggest issue with Uzumaki's 2 bad episodes, or its mediocre one. The script twists nearly a dozen previously self-contained chapter plots into and on top of each other with no regard for causality or pacing, contorting their storylines beyond recognition in a desperate bid to cram every recognizable image across 600 pages of manga into barely 100 minutes of screen time, never giving the audience enough time to breathe for a proper scream as it jumps from jump scare to jump scare at a breakneck pace.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Horror sometimes needs like the atmosphere to build before you get to it as well. You can't just rush it through. You need some sort of creepiness. This seems like it has a lot of creepiness going on, and if he's saying they're just cramming it all in, they've missed out on a huge opportunity there.
In episode 2, the creeping horror of everyone in class slowly being hypnotized by Kyrie's curly new do is repeatedly interrupted by the sweaty kid's transformation into a snail man, which in turn gets interrupted by Kyrie's stalker from a completely unrelated chapter throwing himself in front of a car because she didn't want to open his jack-in-the-box. Then we go back to school to watch Sweat Boy do Mpreg Yowie in the chicken coop with his bully, who's also a snail man now. But then Kyrie gets called out for a schoolyard hair fight with this jealous bitch we just met 10 minutes ago, who wanders off to wrap herself around a telephone pole and die while Shuichi's cutting off Kyrie's spooky spiral hair.
Jesus freaking Christ, that is a lot.
Then we hear the snail boyfriends have broken out of their cage because nothing can contain their love, so Kyrie and Shuichi head up the mountain after them, where they find their teacher smashing up the horrifying abomination eggs they just laid. But then they remember that their other classmates are planning to run away today from the Romeo and Juliet home situation they've got going on, and they arrive at the train station just in time to watch them do poorly synced run cycles on the beach and then trip and fall. But before their dads can start beating them, they twist themselves together into a romantic spiral snake so no one can ever tear them apart again, and slither off majestically into the ocean, giving one final wave as the sun sets. But then the next—
oh my god, this is too much. My brain, oh my god.
morning, a bunch of townspeople can't stop walking in circles for some reason, and when the teacher comes to class, he's a snail man too now, and down by the beach there's a ship that just crashed into the rocks, even though the lighthouse was on last night, because all the sailors on board were busy walking in circles too, and all but one of them went missing after, and Kyrie's brother goes into the lighthouse with his friends for no particular reason, so Kyrie goes in after them, and after like 5 seconds, she's like, oh man, it feels like these stairs are going on forever, and then 5 seconds after that, she finds the charred bodies of those sailors and some other guys, plus the lighthouse lens is all melted now, and Kyrie realizes it's because the light must be super hot, and it's almost sunset when the light turns on, so she tells her brother and his friend that they've got to run, but the friend trips on the stairs and gets incinerated, causing Kyrie and her brother to fall down the stairs and end up in the hospital, and then after the credits, the stalker kid's corpse pops out of his grave and looks at the camera and goes, wah! That's all in one episode.
Jesus Christ. Whoa, I need to breathe. Jeez, so much happening.
Everything after the Romeo and Juliet snake bit happens in the last 5 minutes of that episode.
Oh my god, this is too much.
And I left out some scenes showing Shuichi's mom deteriorating some more. As individual manga chapters, every one of those stories chilled me to my bones. But when you pile them all on top of each other like that, cramming all the time between setup and payoff that Ito used to build tension and develop his characters with other setups for other scares that happen to other characters we're also not given enough time to care about, all you're really left with is the core spooky concepts. And when you strip away his masterful framing and execution, a lot of those ideas are just kind of goofy. There's a fine line between horror and comedy, and even without the hilarious animation that plagues episodes 2 and 3, the changes they make to the timing of most of their scares places them firmly on the wrong side of that line. Take Kyrie's Jack-in-the-Box stalker, for example. The whole focus of his chapter is on his obsession with her, the way he won't stop harassing her for days on end. But when you pull focus away from that to a bunch of other stuff that she also has going on, especially stuff involving actual monsters and supernatural phenomena,
the focus is taken away and you're not really paying attention to that happening, yeah.
Suddenly, he's kind of just an annoying guy who bothers her twice and dies horribly. And having that annoying guy just pop out of the grave of his own volition,
like, so
for a post-credits literal jump spook instead of being dug up by Kyrie because she can't believe that even death is going to stop him from bothering her, just turns the big scare that's supposed to tie his story together into a bad joke of a horror movie cliche. Though it actually becomes a pretty good brick joke at the end of episode 3 when he comes springing up to her house out of nowhere after she's just got done running from a different monster stalker. They could have spent another 5 years animating just those episodes.
Oh my god, that was awful. Jesus Christ.
Ensuring that springy corpse is the most gruesomely detailed animated monstrosity you have ever laid eyes on, and it wouldn't make that scene any less funny. To be fair, the rest of the third episode is less of a mess than the second, devoting 14 straight minutes of build-up and payoff to spooky hospital shenanigans, only briefly interrupting the original manga's scariest two-parter to show the tragic conclusion to Shuichi's mom's story. That does put all the hospital-related scares in those 3 chapters a little too close together for any one of them to hit as hard as they really should, but
so weird.
Maybe better animation would have fixed that. What it wouldn't fix is the 3 total minutes the show dedicates to the horrifying revelation that Kyrie's dad's been obsessively baking tortured human souls into his pottery while she was in the ICU, or the 5 total minutes that she and Shuichi spent running from a hurricane that's in love with her, or the 6 total minutes after that they spend hiding from a different hurricane in an old house that gives you spiky warts before Spring Boy shows up. There is simply too much happening too fast for the horrifying weight of any one thing to really settle in the viewer's mind. Instead of sticking with you and haunting you, it all kind of blurs together into a meaningless blob. And what's really frustrating is all that could have been solved by just cutting 3 or 4 of the less necessary chapters. Jack in the Box is iconic, but he has all to do with the overarching plot. They barely even adapted firing effect to begin with, so that can go. We don't need to see all of the snail to set up the snail people stuff later on, and the sharper writing at the end of Twisted Souls could have led right to the Black Lighthouse without needing to just randomly show people walking in circles without properly explaining that it's the lighthouse doing that. Obviously, the better solution would be to add more episodes, but clearly they were straining the limits of their budget or the producer's patience already, and I know cutting things would have worked because that's exactly what they did in episode 4, judiciously. And the final arc where the spiral traps and consumes everyone in Kurozucho flows together almost seamlessly as a result. It's still a bit rushed and everyone talks altogether way too fucking much in an effort to preserve as much dialogue from the manga as possible, but the final reveal of the Spiral City hits almost as hard as it does in the manga, or at least I think it would if the previous 2 episodes of build-up weren't so fundamentally terrible, and if the post-credits scene didn't undercut a lot of what makes the manga's ending so chilling. I understand the creative impulse to show the start of the next spiral cycle instead of just telling us it's coming, with a new boyfriend and girlfriend and a newly rebuilt Kurozucho going through the same motions as Shuichi and Kyrie at the start of their story, only gender swap this time, implying that even our hero's efforts to resist the spiral are just one more part of its inscrutable and inevitable machinations. But that raises a lot of questions, and dumb questions, not the fun, hauntingly open-ended questions that the original ending raised of when all this will happen again, what form it will take next time, and what happened in cycles past. With this ending, we know for sure that every time the spiral ruins reawaken, all the exact same stuff happens with all the exact same characters, only they look different. Even though the society it happened in and technology it happened with would have been completely different in the past, and we also know that the cycle isn't 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 years long, but short enough that they're still using the same models of trains in the new city, and also the exact same city layout, which kind of makes you wonder why the government would decide to resettle an area within the same generation that thousands of people died there, and the ocean ate at least 6 battleships. And
oh my god.
also why anyone who'd heard about that would want to move there. And I guess that could be explained by the spiral using its mind powers to erase the memories of everyone outside the town, plus also all the paperwork and the great Japanese bureaucratic apparatus that would have no doubt caused someone to check up on where those battleships went, or why there's suddenly a train line and roads that just end in the middle of nowhere. But I much prefer the idea that the spiral wouldn't have to do any of that, because it simply exists on a long enough time scale that it can wait for its prey to inevitably forget and be drawn in all over again by that irresistible allure. That's what makes cosmic horror cosmic horror. It isn't out to get us, it simply gets us by being out there.
Yeah.
The ending's revised, truncated narration also cuts the most horrifying implication of what the spiral does to its victims, warping time itself around its center so that all of their final moments stretch on simultaneously into eternity. A small final comfort for Shuichi and Kirie, who at least got to curl up in each other's arms at the end, and a horrifying final twist for all the others who were transfigured and transfixed alone. That's the shit that kept me staring at the ceiling the longest when I first read the manga. I know some folks really like the new ending, and by default it's certainly better executed than a good 70% of the anime we got, but for me at least, it diminishes the unknowable horror of the spiral without really providing much upside, and that makes me doubt whether I would have fully f***ed with Nagahama's vision for the series, even if he had gotten to complete it, or even if he'd gotten an extra episode or two to fix all the pacing problems. Don't get me wrong, I'm still pissed that he didn't, and frankly, even with all the problems, this is still the best Junji Ito anime ever made by a pretty decent margin.
Wow, okay. Whoa.
So I have no doubts he would have made something pretty fucking good given the chance, but it's easy to get carried away romanticizing every compromised or unfinished work of art as this unimpeachable masterpiece that would have been if only the stars had aligned, when in reality, that level of quality is just as rare for these sorts of projects as it is for ones that do get finished, if not rarer, which is why it's important to take the good with the bad and not let the gap between expectation and result completely overshadow our appreciation for the good points in what we did get. Almost as important as cursing the cultureless money men who stole that potentially better thing from
How dare they?
us. I'm Jeff Thu, professional David Zaslav hater, reminding you to go check out my fall anime recommendations and my recent list of good, easily bingeable horror anime if you want to watch something that won't leave you feeling empty inside.
Wow. God damn. What could have been? What could have been? So much struggle in that. And then I suppose it does take one person to come along and go, look, it's been 5 years. And it's not out. We've got other things we've been working on. We've got other things we can work on. I'm done pumping the money into this. Just put it out there. And yeah, shame. Shame. I might watch the first episode just to see, you know, or I might just watch it. Might read the manga as well. I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? Thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video and want to be able to watch Patreon-only reactions, such as the original Dragon Ball series, the link is in the description to the Patreon page. $1 a month is all I ask to help support the channel. It is greatly appreciated. Thanks for that, guys, for that. And thank you all for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. And I'll see you guys next time.